this isn't the first time in the history of mankind that we are having extremities in weather. We've had the Ice Age, we have the interglacial periods when there was extreme warm periods, and then the Ice Age is the extremely cold periods. The issue of rising lakes, we've had them before. Sea levels rising, we've had them before. How is that different now? Because these are some of the things that we're experiencing. And people like yourself who are experts in this are telling us that these are the signs of global warming.
Yeah, I think, City, I think not too many things will eventually be new. For instance, we are talking about COVID now. Remember the Spanish flu? It's exactly the same story. The question, the bigger question is what effect do we expect and how well prepared are we as far as these things are concerned, And we have an opportunity, and that's the gospel really that we are preaching here, that private sector, government, individuals must be up in arms, trying obviously to make sure that we don't have devastating effects of these challenges. And I think that's the connection that I can be able to put from the historical perspective to what you're having now and what you're going to have in the future, is how well prepared are we, and as humankind, how, what mechanism have we put in place to help us achieve those, not to get into such disasters.
You see, why I bring in the historical aspect is because there are those who argue that these periods have something like 100,000 year cycles. There are those who say, I am far from being even adequately knowledgeable about this, but from my reading, that's what they say. And I'm saying, how do you explain to a lay person that if this has happened before, there were no factories, there were no carbon emissions to speak of, and yet these cycles actually took place? So, what is to stop these cycles from actually going the way they're going and coming to an end, like the others came to an end?
Again, Titi, I would take the history as a baseline. And saying, well, this have happened, these were the consequences. Can we be able to pick up some lessons from that and probably be able to push forward? Here we are talking about future generations, and future generations could come in another 30 years. Now, yes, within those 30 years, we will have done, quite a huge mess to our planet that they can't be able to cope. And remember, I normally remind people that we have borrowed this world from them. So we must either make it better or leave it as we found it. And to be able to do that, obviously, is to take that responsibility is also our duty, both as individuals, companies, as government, to figure out what are the things that we need to do. Of course, to curtail those things that we've seen in the past happening, and hopefully then give them a better livelihood.
What were some of the things that came out of the top of your head, Dr. Mungai, or even things that have been documented, or even plans that are being put forth? If we're saying that we need to take care of this planet, what are we saying needs to be done today, apart from this whole reduction of emissions? Because that on its own can be quite controversial in terms of who's doing what. But then moving forward, what are some of the things that you see are clear, whether it's on an individual basis, whether it's company, industry, government? What are some of those things that we're talking about today?
I think the bottom line still is about emissions, and that's the conversation. But the bigger question now is, what is it that government, for instance, can do, obviously, to ensure that there is to reduce the emissions, but also to help people cope. And there are a couple of things that which comes in top of my mind. Government needs really to do three things, in my honest opinion, or three things. One is, first of all, they need to categorize demand. And how do they categorize demand of, green products which have respected the fact that they are not emitting too much, or they are taking care of our environment? And how do you categorize that demand? Is by obviously creating quite a bit of awareness. And of course, this is not only a government role, but like, for instance, what we are doing here, educating Kenyans and telling Kenyans that this is real, and this is probably what we need to do. There is need for a lot of gospel to be preached about that. The second thing that government obviously need to do is, and this also touches a little bit about what private sector is expected, is also to categorize risk appetite when it comes to financing. For instance, we now have climate change fund, which is being set up by the ministry and together with Treasury. Again, the resources there should be used in such a way that they are able to categorize research and development within organization. They can also be able to help, and I'm not calling about subsidies here, is ways that they can be able to make sure that they are making programs to be more bankable, such that the private sector now can be able to come in. What we call branded finance. Can they be able to create room for branded finance? And I think the last thing that would also be very important is to create an enabling environment. An enabling environment here is where we are saying policies and standards that the government is making should first of all be evidence-based, meaning that they are as a result of what we are seeing on the ground, but more importantly is that they listen to innovators, because all over the world, innovation is always ahead of policy. We will come, as Kenya Climate Innovation Center, will come up with truly nice innovations, but unfortunately, sometimes we can't be able to put them into the market because there is no standards. For instance, packaging of biogas. There's no standard for packaging of biogas in this country. If indeed we had that, then we had more companies, heading towards that, and probably LPG, we would reduce the exposure to LPG. When it comes to individuals, I think the key point here is that we must take responsibility. It's change of behavior. And of course, he's also asking the individuals in terms of consumption and production, that they do it in a more sustainable way. And I did research, I think in 2019, and it was surprising to see that Kenyans, 57% of Kenyans are actually saying they want to buy from sustainable companies, including climate change, which is part of the sustainability agenda. And that's truly a good indicator. Of course, globally is about 70%, but we are headed there. That means that they will be able to push companies. They will also be able to push government in a way to be able to put mechanisms that would help us to, to navigate through this challenge. And for private sector, they must recognize that what we are asking them to do, or what they are doing, this good that they are doing is also good business. And this, I think, is the biggest dilemma. That it's sometimes very expensive to do green stuff, to do environmental friendly stuff within organization, and to embed that within their strategy. But they must also recognize that it creates revenues, it cuts costs, it gives them social license to operate, and at the same time is build the reputation, but more importantly is risk management mechanism. And through these incentives and through these, ideas, then all of us would be able to join the bandwagon, and before we know it, we will be at a better place.